Can you tell us the journey of a Punjabi girl from the village writing in English novels about India but living in Hong Kong?
Well, it is not as transformative as it sounds, but let me retrace my steps. Actually, I grew up in a small town, not a village, but and I spent most of my growing up years there, which is Firozpur. And then, like a typical middle-class good student, I did my engineering in MBA, and I had a corporate life for 8 years, worked with several multinationals, and then we moved to Singapore, which is where I decided to take a break from corporate life. And I had always had this notion that I wanted to write, and since I didn't had enough time on my hands, I was taking a break from corporate life. I decided to write. I began with short stories, and at some point I realized that there was something sort of bubbling within which needed to come to the surface. And the genesis of it is that I grew up during the time of the Sikh militancy in Punjab in the 80s. And that sort of started to bubble up, and I thought maybe I had a story idea there. So I wrote a short story which, to my mind, was not sufficient and did not do justice to it. And then I started to attempt a novel around it, and I had read Chris Mooney Singh's A Train to Pakistan, and I was sort of trying to model this book on that. I wanted it to be a sort of a very personal look at history, and yet for somebody reading it, it would be fiction. But when I started writing that, I realized that I needed to go back and understand the genesis of the militancy. Why did it happen? And as I sort of dwelled further and further into the research, I realized the narrative arc had to begin pre-partition and come all the way to present-day Punjab. So that's how the story, the novel came about. It is called The Long Walk Home. And it really is a story of the life of one man. And as the backdrop, I use a tumultuous 20th century history of Punjab. So it's a layering of the epic with the intimate to tell that story.
So the title is intriguing, The Long Walk Home. Is it also a long walk home for an expatriate living abroad as well?
It is, it is. In one sense, the novel, The Long Walk Home, it derives from the way the novel is structured. It has two parallel threads. One is contemporary, where there is the protagonist has passed away and his children, his family gather for his funeral. And as in India, typically there is an 11th day ceremony for which the family sort of does the final prayers. So in the second thread, the protagonist, he wakes up in the middle of the night with some pain in the heart, and he is a heart patient. So it's 3 a.m. and he's alone at home, and he ventures out in search of a doctor. Now as he walks, there are certain milestones that he sees which trigger his memories. And so it becomes a long walk back through his childhood. And that is in parallel, in sync with the tumultuous events which are happening, which is the partition of Punjab, the linguistic division of Punjab, followed by Green Revolution, Sikh militancy. So I had these two parallel threads, really, and in the end there is a jugalbandi, the threads come together, and the children figure out why the father was taking the long walk, where was he going, what was he doing, what answers was he really searching for. And for me, on the personal front, I started writing this story about several years after my own father had passed away. And without really realizing it, subconsciously, I guess, I was searching, sort of completing a conversation with him, because, you know, I had grown up, I had spent a lot of time away from home, and my father passed away suddenly. So for me, I guess in some ways it was completing a conversation with him. So, yes.
Is there a long walk forward? What's the next walk going to be?
Well, I've actually written my third novel, which is again very different from The Long Walk Home. The Long Walk Home required a lot of research because I did not want to get the historical facts incorrect, and it took a lot in terms of just putting it together. It's a slim book, it's just 272 pages, but it packs in a lot. And with my third book, I wanted to have a little more fun, so it's actually a literary mystery, or stroke thriller, which is again set in India, but it's a little less intensive in terms of the research that's required, and I managed to finish it quite quickly. So it's now sort of, I'm in the final editing process with that.
If you have to sum it all up, what really drives you to write these books?
I think When I grew up, I always had this notion that I wanted to write, but I also was growing up in an environment where one had to be successful, find a challenging career. So I trained as an engineer, did my MBA, worked as a corporate executive across India and in the US. But I think when I finally started to write, it was almost as if there were these stories which had to come up. I mean, the long walk home, in a sense, the trigger was when my nephew said, when he heard about the story I was attempting to write, he said, who's going to read it? And that really was a trigger, because I think there is, in myself at least, I feel there is a desire to pen down experiences which are very strongly related to the history that we, history is also his story, right? It is the story of each person, how they view history. So there's this very strong desire to, in a fictional sense, pen it down and put it down on paper as some sort of testament to events which have happened. And the long walk home is the only fictional treatment of Sikh militancy. It hasn't been done before. So I guess that's really the driver for it.